Okay, showtime. Well, hello, folks. Thanks for tuning in. To all my normal subscribers to my channel, the title to this is not a lie. This is a cooking video. This is not a vaping video. So, feel free to go ahead and watch it if you like, but it's a cooking video. And no, I'm not changing my channel to a cooking channel like Batman did. I've had great success with this recipe, and I just wanted to share it. There might be people out there that, don't vape, never vaped, but like to cook. So nothing's changing, just sharing a good recipe and information. Now, I do apologize. I am not set up to do cooking videos. That's not what I do. So I'm not set up to do it. So we're going to kind of just wing it. And I think you'll be able to get the gist of it and be able to replicate the recipe without any problems. So let's get in the kitchen and get to cooking. Okay, let's start this off. Now, I do apologize again. Like I say, I'm not set up to do cooking videos, but I'll do my best. Now, the first thing we want to do is understand what we're making. We're making cinnamon rolls. We're not making bread, okay? So just get that out of your mind right quick. We're not making bread. We're making cinnamon rolls. So you're going to see that I've tweaked the dough bread recipe quite a bit because I'm doing cinnamon rolls. I'm not doing bread, okay? You can do bread if you want. I was going for a cinnamon roll because I sell them at a local farmer's market, and I have a cottage food license and all that kind of stuff. So I sell them at a local farmer's market during the spring, summer, and fall. And I wanted a recipe where when the person come and bought one of mine, he would chunk rocks at Cinnabon. That's what I was after, okay? And from the feedback I get, I think I got pretty close. So we're going to do a lot of little particular things, and I'll point them out as we get to them. And we're also, I do things because I'm doing them kind of commercially. So there's a few things that I do that you don't need to do if you're just making them for your family, okay, or for you or for your family. Some of the stuff I do you won't need to do, and I'll point that out as we get to it. But the first thing I do, and I use a bread maker to do my dough. I'm not going to sit here and knead dough for 15, 20 minutes, however long it takes. I don't have time to do that. I get one batch of dough going. Once it gets done, I let it rest 10 minutes, and then I start turning it into cinnamon rolls. While that's happening, I got another batch of dough going in the bread machine. So that's the way I do it. If you want to do the total hand thing with a mixer bowl or whatever, that's fine. You can do it that way. I simply can't do it that way because I'm like in a production deal. So to start off, what I like to do now, my recipe calls for, and I'll post the whole recipe in the comments somehow. I've never done that part before either. YouTube don't let us post anything to do with vaping, as far as links or recipes or anything like that. So anyhow, that'll be new to me, but I will post the whole recipe. And so my dough recipe uses milk, butter, real butter, eggs as part of the recipe. So what I like to do is I always like to try to get the very most rise out of my yeast that I can. So I like to scald my milk. And that means heat it to 180 to 185 degrees. Supposedly, I'm not a chemist, supposedly that does something to the whey that's in the milk, because the whey interferes with the yeast. It's what I understand. So it takes a couple of minutes in the microwave. Do it slowly. You don't want to boil it. You just want to scald it. You get it up to 180, 185 degrees. That's all you want. That's all you're after. Okay. So that's what we're going to do first. And we'll do, I don't know if we're going to do jump cuts or what, but some of this will be shot on my phone. Because like I say, I'm not set up to do this. I do have 2 cameras here in the kitchen. But, you know, I don't normally do cooking videos. So anyhow, let's get our recipe out right quick. There we go. I do my recipes on just basically a cheat sheet. And this recipe calls for 1 cup of milk, and I use whole milk. I don't use skim milk. Whole, baby, whole. I want everything. So we got us a brand new half a gallon. And we got a really, really old measuring cup. We're going to measure this out. Now, you don't need to see me pour milk into a cup, okay? We're going to go 1 cup. There we go. Then we're going to put that in the microwave and heat it up to 185. 180 to 185. And we're going to get out our little handy dandy food thermometer. And if you don't have one of these, you need to pick one up at Walmart. It has lots of uses. You don't have to guess if you're cooking chicken or something in the oven. You don't have to guess if it's done or if it's going to give you food poisoning. You can just stick this in there, and it'll tell you right quick. Oh, hell, he's up to 200 degrees. It's done. It's overdone to some people, but I cook my chicken at 200 degrees. So anyhow, we're going to pop this in the microwave and probably shoot that part off my phone. Maybe not. Do you really need to see that? Probably not. Now, one of the other secrets to making bread or cinnamon rolls or any kind of yeast product is I like to keep my wet ingredients around 100 to 110 degrees, okay, if I can. 90's fine, 80's okay, nothing over 110. So the next thing, everything, you know, when you start off fresh in the morning, everything's cold. You got to warm it up. So we're going to get us out some eggs and some butter. Now I'm not too concerned about the butter, okay? All right, now, we've nuked that for about 1.5 minutes. We'll take it out and get our thermometer going here. Now, all we're going to do, if we can see, yeah, we can see that. Just stick her down in here. Give it a little stir. See what it is. Okay, so we're at 130. Leave it in there, it might help. So we're already up to about 140. Now you want to do this a little at a time. You want to do it a small portion at a time. So we're going to go. We're up to 177. So give it about 15 more seconds. Stir it up. There we go. See, we're 185, 186, 187. That's perfect. That's exactly what we wanted. Now, okay, our milk is 185 degrees. It's too hot for the yeast. Got to cool it down. How are we going to do that? Hell, we're going to put some cold butter in it. Now, while we're doing that, you got to get a few of these things kind of going simultaneously at the same damn time. How about that? All right. Get us some hot water going. And what I mean by that is our eggs are cold. We want to heat them up to room temperature, maybe a little bit warmer. Now you can set them out and wait if you would like. What I do is simply get me a little bowl of hot water from the tap, set the eggs in it for a few minutes. It'll bring them right up. There we go, just like that. Just hot tap water. Let the eggs soak. All right, now, butter. We got to cool this milk off. And we need 1/3 of a cup, and I use unsalted butter because salt does things to your yeast. And there is salt in this recipe, but I don't want extra salt. I don't need extra influence on my yeast. So as far as the normal recipe goes, I use unsalted butter. Now, once I get all the rise out, if you would like to take and put some salted butter over the top of them before, after, or during your baking part of it, that's cool. You know, it does make them taste a lot better. Now, all I'm doing here, it's not on camera. I guess let's try the other camera. Anyhow, all we're going to do, we're going to get us 1/3 of a cup of butter. I'm going to cut it in 2 pieces, and we're just going to put it in our milk and let the hot milk dissolve the butter. We're going to save this little piece here. We'll just go ahead and put it in a little cup, and we will nuke that later because we will need some melted butter along the way of this recipe. Okay, now we're going to get out our bread machine, and it's just a Oster bread machine. It's nothing special about it. Nothing special. And we're going to mix up our ingredients. We're waiting for our butter to dissolve in our hot milk. It's getting there. Let's get our other ingredients. Start to get our other ingredients ready over here. And get our other ingredients out. We're just getting all set up this morning. Takes a while to get the first batch going. Okay, now always be conscious of the temperature of your ingredients. So our milk / melted butter is still 130 degrees. That is too hot for our yeast. But we do have our room temperature eggs. Now, for the normal recipe, it calls for 2 eggs. Because I'm in Arizona and it's really dry out here, I use 3 because my flour is actually more dry than it would be in other parts of the country. So it makes my dough a little bit too dry. But instead of adding more milk or water, I put another egg in. To me, it just improves the recipe. So I like to give mine a little, just a little whisk with a fork, nothing special, just kind of help get the stuff, get the mix going. So we're going to take our bread thing, or you could be using your mixer bowl, whatever you're going to use. Okay, going to put our milk and butter in. Then we're going to ease our eggs down in there. Now, let's see what temperature, where we're at now. And got to look at it quick. Anyhow, we're down to 90 degrees. Perfect. 100 degrees, 90 degrees. Anything under 110 degrees. So now the recipe calls for 1/3 of a cup of sugar. Get that down in there. It calls for a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Get that down in there. Okay. Then 4 cups of flour. Now, I use Walmart brand all-purpose flour because I'm making these to sell, and I'm making quite a few of them. So that's what we do. You can use expensive flour. You can use bread flour. Might actually make them a little tad better. They claim it has to do with the gluten and all that kind of stuff. Anyhow, we need 4 cups of flour. Now, so far, besides scalding the milk and paying close attention to the temperatures of our wet ingredients, we haven't strayed from a normal bread recipe too much. One more. And there we go. Just leave that in here. This ain't the only batch we're going to make today. Put that over there. Now we need our yeast. And I use Fleshman's Rapid Rise. And how many of you have ever actually read the back of your yeast packet? You might look at the date, but have you ever read the back? Interesting things you find out when you do that, because if you look at different bread dough recipes, even the ones for cinnamon rolls, they want you to rise the dough twice. One time here, baby, one time. And guess what? Where's it at here? This yeast here requires only 1 rise. Well, I'll be damned. And it does make a difference too, because you'll get, and you wouldn't want to do this for bread. Now, I'll admit that, but you get on the first and only rise, you will get larger bubbles, okay? And after all that bakes, it makes for a fluffy, lighter. It's what you want for a cinnamon roll, okay? It ain't what you'd want for a slice of bread, because you'd go to put some mustard and mayonnaise on it, and hell, it just wouldn't work right. You want a nice small crumb on bread, but cinnamon roll, different story. That's where a lot of people fall a little short. So I just put my yeast on top. Some people will go to the trouble of make a little hole in the flour and pour it on top, roll on. Ain't got time for all this. Now let me double check my recipe. I believe I got everything in there. Milk, eggs, butter, sugar, salt, flour, yeast. All right. We're going to put our little basket here in our bread machine, put it on the dough setting, and let it do its thing. Now, we got a little while before our deal is ready. So what I do on this in this time, I prep my my pans, and I preheat I use my oven as a proofing box, and the way I do that is I turn it on for 1 minute. I set the timer 1 minute of cook at 350 degrees, and I turn the light on and leave it on, and that gets my oven up to temp to proof the yeast, the dough. So we're going to go bake, cooking time, 1, start. Okay, now, while we're still waiting on our bread maker to do the dough for us, it's almost done. We're going to get prepped just a little bit here. Get my cooking board that I like out. And I use HDPE. That's the proper term. I don't like wood. My rolling pin's stainless steel. I don't like wood. If you like wood, go for it. I don't like wood. Now, because my countertop is ceramic tile, what I do is take some of these baking mats, silicone baking mats. I put it under my cutting board, and that way it doesn't move around on me. It glues it kind of to the countertop. Okay. Once our bread machine gets done with the dough, we're going to put it in a greased it with a little vegetable oil. You can use butter if you want. You can use non-stick spray. It's up to you. I just use cooking oil. We're going to put our dough ball in here. We're going to cover it with plastic. I like using plastic, saran wrap type stuff. Some people just use a cup towel. I don't like doing that. We're going to put our dough ball in there. We're going to give it a good coating of oil so it doesn't dry out and develop a skin. And we're going to let it rest for 10 minutes. No more, a little less if you need to. 9, 8, you can get away with it. But it lets the dough relax, makes it easier to roll out, and we'll go from there. Okay, our bread machine is done. We're going to take our dough ball out of the mixer. There's our dough ball. Okay, and we're just going to put it down in here and give it a couple of flips. Get it coated with the oil. And like I say, you can use butter. You know, you can not use anything if you want, but you're going to get a skin. And I don't like skins. And we're going to cover this with plastic wrap. Just going to seal that up, kind of airtight. Then we're going to let this rest. We're going to set a timer. So I don't want to go over 10 minutes. I don't want to really, it's going to rise a little bit, but I don't want to get a full rise out of the dough. I just want it to rest, basically. But it'll rise a little bit while it's resting. So we're going to just set a timer and come back in 10 minutes. All right, our timer went off. Now, one of the neat things about using the vegetable oil and using HDPE boards is you don't have to put flour on it. Okay, now we're only going to work with half of this dough ball at a time. And I do not have a pastry scraper thing, so I just use a big old knife. You can use a scale if you want to. I don't find it's necessary. We're just going to half our dough. We're going to put half of it back in our greased bowl. We're going to put our plastic back on top. We don't want it drying out while we're working our other piece of dough. Get covered again. There we go. And I'll get that out of the way. Now this is going to be kind of hard to do on camera, but I'm going to try it. So now all we want to do now, you see how when you just press on it, see it stays where you put it? That's because you let it rest. Okay. Your hands will get oily this way instead of floury. Is that a word? Floury? You get flour all on. Anyhow, like I say, I like to use stainless steel and HDPE. I don't like wood. So we're going to just roll our dough out here. And now remember, this is kind of at your discretion on how big you want your rolls to be, how many of them you want to make, how thick you want them to be. All of mine, I try to make mine uniform in a particular thickness and a particular size, because I have them, I'm putting them into a 4x4 plastic container that seals. That's what I sell them in. And let's scoot this down a little bit. There we go. Camera was messing with me. Now, if you're just making these for your family, you know, it's not that big a deal. You know, you can have one big one, one little one, and it's not that big a deal. But I need to do mine fairly uniform and fairly identical. So, to that end, I have bought a dough cutter that I can adjust and get uniform cuts. We'll show you how this works a little later. Now, you remember the little tad of butter we had left over from our stick? We just melt that down. Take a nice silicone brush. I don't like using other brushes because they end up leaving brush hairs in your food. So I like using just a silicone brush. Anyhow, we're just going to paint. We're just going to paint this with butter. You don't want it like running off or anything, but you do want a good coating. Just a good coating, that's all you want right there. Set that to the side. Now the filler, if you can call it a filler, it's kind of what you would call it on this particular recipe. We made it off camera because it's just a matter of mixing together. Mix together some brown sugar, regular sugar, and cinnamon. That's it. Okay, I'm going to jump in here and give you a little more detailed deal about the filler that we did. Of course, we painted on our melted butter, and then we added our filler, which for one batch of rolls, and a batch is what I count as what my bread machine makes, which was the 4 cups of flour recipe. Half a cup of sugar, regular sugar, half granular sugar, and half a cup of brown sugar, and 1 tablespoon of cinnamon. Now you can vary the cinnamon depending on whether you want more or less. Okay, and guess what? You can make your own brown sugar instead of going to the store and paying 5 times the amount for a little sack of brown sugar. As you can buy 5, or not 5, I'm exaggerating. You can buy at least 2 5-pound bags of sugar for what you pay for 1 little package of brown sugar. Get you a little bottle of molasses. 1 cup sugar, 1 tablespoon molasses, stir it up. Brown sugar. 1/5 the cost. If you don't want to go that much trouble, just get a little sack of brown sugar. You know, if you're not into brown, if you don't really like the taste of brown sugar at all, don't use it. Just 1 cup of, then it would be 1 cup of regular sugar, tablespoon of cinnamon. Okay, because you're going to want to use, when you roll your dough out, you're going to have 2 sets, you know. So you're going to use half a cup. You saw me use 2 quarter cups in the video, which half a cup. So you're going to use half a cup on one sheet of dough, and you're going to use the rest of it, the other half cup, on the second sheet of dough. Okay, so that gets you the 1 batch. So that's basically the filler. That's all there is to it. And of course, there's a lot more here than what you're going to mix up, because I'm doing several batches. But what's in the recipe we'll make 1 batch of cinnamon rolls. So we got us a 1/4 cup measuring deal here, and we're going to measure this out. 1/4 cup, just basically spread it like that, and another 1/4 cup. So we're going to do a half a cup, and it can be heaping cups, it's fine. We're basically putting in a half a cup of our filler, and then we're going to just I just take my hands and I smooth it out. And that way, if there's any lumps of sugar left, I can break them up with my fingers. And we're just going to smooth it out. Level it out, even it out. Okay. And where you see a light spot, just put you a little more over there. See something you don't like, take it out. Sometimes the sugar will get crystallized. You'll see pieces of sugar, and you'll see little balls of the brown sugar that didn't integrate real well. Just smooth her out, just like that. Wash my hands. Now, I only do this next part because I'm doing them commercially, and I want to try to make them exactly the same. If you're at home, you can roll it up this way and cut it with a knife. You can cut it with dental floss, however you want to cut it. It really don't matter. Or you can roll it this way and then cut it, okay? But since I'm doing this commercially, I want mine to be pretty much identical. So I just take my cutter here and I make a cut like that, okay? Trim off the little edges here. That you don't have to do this if you're doing them at home. Your kids and family ain't gonna care that much if your edges aren't just perfect. Sometimes my little cutter don't go all the way through, so I just take a pizza cutter, and since I've got the dough scored, I can go ahead and finish making the cut. Now you see we got 5 nice ones, and we got 1 left over, and I will cook this, and I cut it up, and that's my sample. That's what I use for samples. Okay? So now we just take and roll it up just like that. And you take and pinch the end. Give it a little pat down. Pinch the end again. Then I put it in the pans I use are 8x8 because I want a 4x4. I put 4 in here because I want a 4x4 uniform cinnamon bun. Now you can use bigger glass platters, metal ones, whatever. But I do use parchment paper. I sprayed a little cooking spray down in there to get it to stick good. One of the main things is lubricate the side of the pan And I don't care if it's no stick. You need to lubricate the side of the pan, butter, vegetable oil, cooking spray, something, because when the dough starts to rise and it starts to hit the side, you want it to be able to just slide up that side with no resistance whatsoever. You don't want the first part of the dough to stick to the side and then it won't come on up. It won't grow. So we're just going to put them in there like that. And do the other 4. Just do them all the same. Just roll them up like that. Give it a pinch. To me, it's easier to roll them up separately. It takes a little more time, but you know, it's kind of hard to roll up that whole dough. And like I say, I'm going for a uniform deal. Put that over there. I'm doing this in real time so you kind of get an idea of how long it takes. Give this a pinch. You're a good pinch here. Boy, that ain't wanting to stay. Sometimes you really got to work your end to get it to stay together. I think that'll be all right. Roll that up. And we'll get our little sample one here rolled up. We put that in. I put the sample ones in a different pan. You know, if you're doing them for home, you can put them. You can put them all in the same pan. It's no big deal. Just leave plenty of room for them to rise, because this is going to be the one and only rise we get. So it's usually a pretty big one. Now, as you hear, the bread machine is working in the background here. It's behind us, and it's working on the next batch of dough while we're getting these ready. Now, there's what they kind of look like. What I do is I cover them with plastic wrap. I don't want them drying out. Go one. This might be overkill, but this is how I do it. Put one layer one way, one layer the other way. Now these are ready to go into our proofing oven. Now, because I'm real concerned with the temperatures, with all temperatures, I have actually a little infrared gun. I don't just stick a thermometer in my oven or trust the built-in thermometer. So we're going to see just what the oven is, and the bottom deal of the oven is 98 degrees. So that is perfect. Right around 100 degrees, it's perfect. And we're going to put this in. We're going to roll out our other ones. We're going to put them all into the oven. Usually it takes about 2 hours. You want to keep an eye on them. They'll come up, and then they'll basically stop growing. They'll get to a point they stop growing. At that point, when you need to cook them. or when you need to bake them, because otherwise it'll just the bubbles will start bursting, and the dough will tend to collapse a little bit. So you got to keep an eye on it. When you see they haven't grown anymore in like 5-10 minutes, it's time to bake them. And it's exactly 10 o'clock now, so I'll keep an eye on it. I'm probably about 2 hours. Now all we're going to do is roll out the rest of this dough and get that in the oven proofing, and we're waiting on the next batch of dough to come out of the machine. Okay, now something that I do is I keep an eye, especially after I get, now we have gotten all of our cinnamon rolls in the oven. We're proofing them, we're letting the yeast rise, and it's been about maybe an hour or so or longer since we originally heated the oven up just a little bit. So once I get all my whatever I'm proofing loaded in the oven, I bump it on. I bump it on again for about 1 minute. 1 minute at 350 degrees. Set the timer. You don't want to walk off because you'll end up forgetting and killing the yeast. You get some words out some days. Anyhow, we're going to bump it up for another minute. We're going to let those proof, rise, develop, however you want to call it. Okay, we're good. And we've got the lights still on. And I figure in about 2 hours they'll have risen the max that they're going to rise. And then we'll start baking them. Okay, now, if you're just making one batch for your family, for you or your family, you won't have any trouble. You can get them, make the batch, get them all into the oven, let them proof, regardless of how long it takes, and then bake them. Now, if you find yourself in a situation to where you're like me and you make multiple batches, okay, maybe for an event or a party or your kid's school or something like that, the trouble you're going to run into is your first batch is going to be proofed and ready to bake before your last batch. You might still be making dough by the time the first batch gets proofed. Okay, now it's best, you can set it out on the counter for just a little while. Do not put it in the icebox, it'll collapse. Oh, I wasted, I don't know how much dough listening to people on YouTube saying, oh, it'll rise in the icebox. And you can put it in the icebox and it'll quit rising. Yeah, guess what else it does? It collapses. Yeah. Just because you're YouTube certified don't mean you know what the hell you're talking about. Anyhow, what I do, and what I'm actually going to probably do today, I don't know, I may not have to today. I'm only doing 2 batches today. I usually do 3, but I'll show you what I do when I have multiple batches. Okay, now I think this will work on, it may even work on a gas stove. It's going to be a lot harder to do on a gas stove. Just get you out some shallow pans. I lay them on top of my stove, top of my burners, okay? And then what I do is I will just turn, usually just one. I'll just turn one of the burners on low for just a little bit, just to heat up the cooktop and to heat up the pan. It gets hot pretty fast. Depends on what kind of stove you got. Okay, this one, see what this one is. This one's already up to 92 degrees. Remember, we don't want it over 110. And I'm just heating things up. And then I will and we're going to crank it up a little bit. Now, depending on your stove or your oven, you may have good enough heat coming up from the oven that you don't have to do this. Where are we at now? Okay, we're 115, so we're going to turn that knob. This one here is, it's coming on up, so 110 at the back. Let that stay on just a little bit longer. Just all you want to do is warm the pan up, and if you've got a solid surface cooktop, warm it up, and then turn everything off, and it'll retain your heat for you. Then you can take the ones out of the oven that are proofing but aren't finished yet. You can take them out, set them up here, and start baking in your oven, and these will go ahead and proof. Now you can go to the expense of buying one of those proofing boxes or making your own proofing box, or any of that. I try to get by with what I got. That's my theory. Let's see. Now, see, this is 115. I'd wait till it cooled off to 110. That way I know I'm completely safe. And this one, see, it's 118. But wait till these cool off to 110. That way you're totally safe. You know you're not going to kill your yeast. And if you need to start baking, then take your ones out that aren't proofed good enough, put them up here, leave the saran wrap on top of them, and put them up here, and then just start baking. And by the time you get around to them, they'll be proofed, and you can put them in. All right, an old ball man one time told me, he said, "Son, you'll click that start recording button, you won't have to do this 2 or 3 times." How about that? Okay, while we're waiting on our dough to rise and bake, we hadn't baked it yet. We're still letting it rise. We've been about an hour and a half. I'm thinking about 2 hours on the first ones, and they'll be ready to bake. Now's a good time to get you an area prepped to turn your cinnamon rolls out on, and to glaze them on if you're going to use the glaze, or ice them, either one. If you just want to hook you up a nice simple cream cheese icing and put it on top with a butter knife, you do you. It's fine. I'm limited to the icing I can use because of the cottage food laws. I cannot have anything that has to be refrigerated. I can't have uncooked butter, cream cheese, milk, heavy cream. I can't have anything like that in my icing. They don't allow it because it would have to be refrigerated. Nothing wrong with it. It would just have to be kept, at a certain temperature to make everybody happy. So I do a sugar glaze, and I'm a little hesitant to show that on YouTube, not because it's a secret or anything. It's just because it's dangerous to work with, because it's melted hot sugar, and it will burn you. And I'm gonna go ahead and show it, but I'm gonna warn you every 5 minutes. And I've been doing this a while, so I know how to handle. I know I have a way to do it where I don't get burnt. But the best way to do it, if you're going to do the glaze, get you a baking rack, line your countertop with cheap wax paper. Doesn't have to be good wax paper, cheapest wax paper you can buy. Put you a little bit of masking tape on the edges to hold it, just a little strip here and there, just so you don't have to fight it. Get you a baking rack, take your cinnamon roll, set it down, get you a small pot with a good handle, because if you put the hot icing in a bowl, guess what? The bowl's going to get hot, and you're going to be trying to hold the hot-ass bowl. It's just going to be a nightmare. So small pot with a handle, so you can, because every now and then you got to reheat it, because as it cools, the sugar recrystallizes, and you got to keep it at a pretty good temperature to keep it liquid and clear, transparent, we'll say, because it's got a little yellow tint to it because we're going to put some vanilla flavoring in it. But the transparent, you don't want an opaque. When the crystals start forming, it gets foggy looking and you can't see straight through it. And we don't want that. We want it transparent. Anyhow, the safest way is set the roll down on the baking rack, get you a silicone brush like you saw me apply the butter with a while ago, and just paint it with the glaze. And that way you're very, very less likely to burn yourself. That's not how I'm going to do it, but that's how I would recommend you do it if you're the type of person that cuts themselves every time they walk in the kitchen, burns themselves every time they open the oven. If you're that type of person, you need to get a brush and paint it on. Okay, you don't need to do it the way I'm going to do it. So I think in about 30 more minutes, we'll be ready to start baking. Okay, now we put those in at 10 o'clock to proof. Now I know I've watched, I don't know how many videos. Oh, you gotta let them rise for an hour, and then knock the dough down, redo them, all this crap. Then let them rise for 4 hours. No. Rapid-arized yeast. You saw it. You saw the deal. Okay. Now, I wouldn't recommend buying the Walmart brand yeast because I looked at where both were made, and I prefer my yeast to be made where this is made. I don't want to disparage anybody, so I won't mention the other country the Walmart brand's made in. I don't want none of that. So now I'm very picky. It's 11:45 right now. So I could let those others rise for about 15 more minutes, I think. And but I'm real picky when I go to bake. If you've got one of the newer ovens, you know what you do. You set the temperature, you tell it to start, and it'll say preheating, and then it'll beep in a little bit. I don't trust that. I always let it go about at least 10 minutes more. I want to be absolutely sure that everything in that oven is 350 degrees. Okay? So we're going to get these out. I'm going to give you a little close-up look at what they look like. And we're going to get the oven heating up. Now let's hit you can see they're coming over the top of the deal. And if you want them to rise a whole lot taller, then leave your plastic wrap a little looser, so they can come up on there. Let me change cameras here and get a close-up of these. And I'm going to leave the plastic wrap on till just before I put them in the oven so that they will stay moist. I do not want a skin to form over the very top of my yeast. But let's see if I can get a good close-up. Now this would, like I say, wouldn't make very good bread because if you notice the texture here, you can see the holes the yeast made. They're pretty big, and it just wouldn't make a pretty loaf of bread. That's not what we're after. See, and guess what? All the little holes and craters and whatnot that the yeast is making will fill up with icing. Yes, it will. Okay, here's a little better point of view. This is our ones that we're still proofing. We're not really concerned that much with these here. They're still proofing, but we're not concerned too much with those two because they're going to be our samples. Here is the one of the ones that's ready to bake, and this one is ready to bake. And I wanted to give you a close-up of what I was just talking about. As you can see, how coarse this looks, and that's because we're making cinnamon rolls. We're not making bread, and that's the little pockets and craters that are going to absorb and hold our icing. Okay, now we have preheated our oven to 350 degrees and we waited an extra 10 minutes. So now we're ready to bake. We're going to just take our plastic wrap off and gently, because sometimes they'll stick to the top to the plastic wrap. You don't want to disturb your dough. Like I said previously, I like doing 2 at a time. That way it doesn't overload my oven and doesn't take that long. So put them in on the middle rack. That's where I like to bake them. And we're going to set our timer for 18 minutes. Now, this is where it's going to vary a lot depending on your stove, what kind of pan you're cooking in, how big a pan you're cooking in. Because you can make these, if you're doing them for your family, you can do 11 by 9s. And it's also going to depend on how thick, how big you made the rolls. You don't have to make them as big as I did. I do it because I sell them. You can make the smaller ones. It's totally up to you. But all that is going to vary your cooking time. So you're going to have to figure that out on your own. And one other thing to keep in mind, especially if you're using a metal pan like I am, the filling, the brown sugar and the regular sugar and the butter, all that's going to liquefy. Some of it's going to run down to the bottom, and if you cook it long enough, it will caramelize. And it'll kind of give you almost like a crust, basically, on the bottom. Now, if I was making them for myself, that's the way I would do it. I would cook them for about 22, 23 minutes, and I would get that kind of a little bit of a crust on the bottom and get that stuff caramelized. But my customers, they want ooey gooey. That's what they want. And they don't want the tops real brown. They just want it ooey gooey. And if you've ever made cinnamon rolls before, you know what I'm talking about. So 18 minutes, and we're going to pull them out. Okay, now while these are baking, we still got the rest of them up here proofing. And you can see they're pretty much done now. But if you've got OCD as bad as I do, or you just are a perfectionist, you want to, of course, we haven't turned on the stovetop here, except for that very first little bit, just to get our pans warmed up. And now we're using the heat radiating from the oven to keep everything warm. But it's not a bad idea. I always like to take and check and see that our pan is 95 degrees. Our dough is 92, 3 degrees, 4 degrees, okay, which is perfect. 90 to 100, it's perfect temperature. We're just going to make sure we don't get it too hot. If you think it's starting to get too hot, if your oven leaks a little bit too much heat, whatever, just take them off, set them to the side, and switch them back and forth. But you want to try to keep them between 90 and 100 degrees. That way they'll proof up. Now, you can go too long on this style of baking. Like if I left these up here for a couple of more hours, they wouldn't really get any bigger. What they would do, and I'm not going to do it just to show you, but the resemblance you would get is it would look like the dough had melted a little bit, just a little bit. They wouldn't lose too much lift, but it would look like it had melted. That's the best description I can give you. And if you start getting that look, then you know you've proofed it too long, and you need to cut back on that time. But right now we've only got 13 minutes left on the first batch. We'll get the second batch in, and they're not going to, 13 more minutes is not going to hurt these whatsoever. But if you're concerned, if they've proofed as much as you want, you might say, one way to help them is just take them off and lay them on a cool countertop. And that will, it won't stop, but it'll slow down the proofing. It'll slow down the yeast. If you're a little bit concerned, or if you say are, behind on baking, you've got some proofed up, and for instance, if I was making 3 or 4 batches today, I would take these at this point in time. I would take these and set them over on a cool countertop, and put some more up here that needed to finish proofing. All right, we just got our first batch out of the oven, and it should go without saying, when you get them out of the oven, set them on a countertop that'll withstand the heat, okay? And let me give you an idea of what they look like. Like I say, this is a preference thing of how brown you want the tops. Let me switch cameras here. And this is what they look like. See, they're not very brown at all. They're still yellow. Now you can put an egg wash on it if you want a brown and crispy top. That's totally up to you. My customers like ooey gooey, so you give your customer what they want. I'm just going to let these sit here just until they cool off enough to where I can grab a hold of the pan with my bare hands, and then I'm going to turn them out. I still want them to be fairly warm. That way, if anything is stuck on the bottom, which even though we put parchment paper down, you're dealing with sugar. Sugar turns into syrup. Sugar caramelizes. You know what I'm saying? It gets sticky. So as long as it's still good and warm, you have less trouble with it sticking. So as soon as those cool down enough to where I can touch them with my bare hands, I'm going to turn them out. I'm going to flip them. I'll show you. We'll put it on the up-close camera. But I'm going to flip them over here on the wax paper. Now, one of the little tricks I use, even though these are non-stick pans, is I take a plastic knife, plastic throwaway knife. Okay. Now, if you've got fancy silicone spatulas or silicone cooking utensils, that'll work too. Just you don't want to scratch your non-stick surface. And all I do is take it, run it around the edges, okay? Then, and this is still good and warm, then we just flip it upside down. Just that easy. Peel off the parchment paper. And see, you want to do all this while it's the filling is syrupy, warm and syrupy. And so it doesn't stick to nothing. Because syrup and crystallized sugar will stick to, it'll stick to parchment paper, stick to just about anything. Now, we're going to leave these, I'm going to move them down to the other end of the table, but we're going to leave them just as they are until we get ready to glaze them. We're not going to flip them over, because if you can tell how gooey this is, okay, you want them to cool completely. You can let them cool. You really want them to cool completely, okay, and that'll help set this caramelized sugar and syrup and the stuff you got going on here. That'll help set that so it won't stick to everything that touches it. Now, one of my little secrets, a lot of people would be tempted to start pulling them apart right now, okay? But understand what you got here. You got a crust, okay? It's not really going to go stale. It's a crust, okay? So it's protected, you might say, all right? If you pull this apart, you're going to have pure crumb, they call it in the bread world, but pure raw or uncrusted bread. You're going to have the center of the bread. Now, as soon as the air hits that, it's going to start going stale. It's just the same way as taking a slice of bread out of a loaf of bread and laying it on the counter. And we really want these to get good and cool. So do not pull them apart. I don't pull them apart. I'll put it that way. I don't pull them apart until I'm ready to glaze them. Because when I pull them apart, I'm going to instantly put a layer of hot glazed sugar on the outside, and that's going to seal it. It's going to, and then that'll crystallize, and it'll seal the air away from it. If you're serving them to your family and you're doing a cream cheese type of icing just on the top, leave them together if you can until you're ready to serve them. You can turn them out, but flip them back over, but leave them stuck together. Go ahead, put your icing on, and then store them, refrigerate them, put plastic wrap over the top, however you want to protect them. But try not to pull them apart until you're actually ready to hand it to whoever's going to eat it. If you're doing just like a cream cheese cake style icing on the top, that's just a good little tip. But we're just going to pick these up and take them down here to the end and get them out of my work area. Okay, now we're going to start doing the icing for the glaze. And I will say this again. If you do it this way, there is a very high danger level of getting burnt. You're dealing with hot, sticky liquids. Okay, so if you get burnt, don't blame me. If you're not real secure in this, you can do a simple, if you still want to do a similar glaze, just substitute the granular sugar with powdered sugar. Don't get it nowhere near a stove, and just take you a whisk and whisk it and add liquid, the extra liquid, until you get it the consistency that you want it to be. There's really no right and wrong. If it's too thick, it's really hard to paint it on. If it's too thin, it runs off. So you just got to add the liquid, add the water a little at a time and whisk it till you get it to the consistency you want. It makes a pretty good glaze. Okay, so the original recipe. Now, take in consideration, understand how this is going to work. We're going to put the ingredients in. We're going to start heating it up, and we're going to add water as we go. We don't want to add too much water. We just want enough to dissolve the sugar. And it's if you're doing a small amount, like the base recipe, you want to add it a teaspoon at a time. If you're doing a large amount, like I am, because I've got to glaze 20 cinnamon rolls here, I'm going to add it a tablespoon at a time because I'm dealing with a lot more to start with. Okay? But the original recipe is all ones. It's 1 cup of sugar, 1 tablespoon of my secret ingredient, which is the classic caramel Tarani, I guess that's how you pronounce it, coffee flavoring syrup. Now I use the classic caramel. I don't use the salted caramel. Okay, but that's the secret ingredient. And then we start off with a tablespoon of water and a teaspoon of vanilla flavoring or extract, whatever you like to use. Okay. Now, if you do the sugar, if you don't want to do the cook part, substitute the powdered sugar, whisk it together, see what you got, add water as necessary. Okay. Because I've done this recipe several times, I know I could start it, if I'm cooking it, I can start it easily with 2 tablespoons of water. Okay, so I'm going to add I've already got my 5 cups. I'm doing basically 5 things. I'm doing 5 cups. That'll give me a little extra at the end. 6 would do 3 sets of dough, batches I call it, of dough. And it's a little sparingly at the end. You kind of run a little bit low. So it's just a cup of sugar and a teaspoon of this, tablespoon of that. It's no big deal if you make too much. But anyhow, I'm going to go ahead and start adding my other ingredients here. And I use a Dutch oven because the Walmart I had didn't have a saucepan this size by itself for me to purchase. I had to buy this whole set that I didn't want. So the Dutch oven does me good. You want to go with a pan, a saucepan. It's better first with a saucepan because you got a long handle. You want to go with a medium to large, depending on how much you're doing, whether you're doing 1 cup, 2 cups, or what not. Because when this stuff, we're going to bring it to a good boil. And when this stuff starts boiling, it pretty much doubles in size. And then you got to play with it on the heat. You got to take it off the heat, put it on the heat, because it will just boil over and go everywhere if you leave it on the heat once it starts boiling. But when we get to a point that you need to see a close-up, I'll use my phone because like I say, I don't do cooking videos. I don't have an overhead camera set up for a burner or the stove. So let me add my other liquids here. And we'll get this underway. Now I know I'm going to have more water, but I don't want to add too much at the start. And we actually pressed the record button this time. How about that? Okay, so I need 5 tablespoons of this. 2, 3, 4, 5. And I need, where's my trees? I need 5 teaspoons of, and I need 5 teaspoons of vanilla. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's like watching grass grow. Now, get me a work area going over here. Now, if you're doing, like I say, if you're doing a small batch, you're going to want to add your liquid, your water, extra water, 1 teaspoon at a time. Because of the size I'm going here, I'm going to go a tablespoon at a time. Okay? And we're going to go ahead and turn our stove on. Start stirring this up. Okay. Here's what it's going to look like. Doesn't look like much at the moment. But you want to make sure you get some moisture down to the bottom of the pan. You don't want no dry sugar. Well, this is harder than I thought. I would definitely have to get a overhead gimbal if I was going to do this for very often. Just work it around. Get your sugar mixed up real good. You don't want any dry sugar touching the bottom of the pan. And you can kind of see the consistency here. If you don't have that consistency to start with, add you a little more water, a teaspoon or tablespoon at a time. Get everything stirred up, kind of a medium-high heat, and do not walk off. Do not go sit down. Do not get you a cup of coffee. Do not let go of this spoon. And you stir. And this is just to keep it from sticking to the bottom of the pan. And what we're going to do, let me turn these out right quick. These are our samples that were the last thing to bake. Right. This is hard to describe, but what we're going to do is we're going to bring this to a boil. We're not going to let it overboil, not going to let it boil out of the pot, but we want to bring it to a boil, and then we want to move it off the heat, let the bubbles die down, and then we're going to look at it to see if it's transparent. And if it's not, we're going to add a little bit of water. I'm doing it 1 tablespoon at a time, but if you're doing a small batch, 1 teaspoon at a time. That's all it takes for it to be cloudy, grainy. You know, look, 1 tablespoon or 1 teaspoon of water will make it translucent. It's really amazing how little it takes to get it to transform. We're just going to keep stirring it. And don't make your decision to add more water or not until you bring it to a really good boil, move it over from the heat, let it die down, and then look at it. Then make your determination if you need to put more water in it or not. Okay, we're starting to get a boil now. Just remember to keep stirring. It's really starting to boil. You got to watch it, because even though you're stirring it, it'll boil right out of that pot. Try your best to keep the sides scraped down. You'll have some crystals forming on the side of your pan. Really getting the boil good now. Keep a stirring. Let it boil a few minutes. Not very long. About a minute or so, then move it off the heat. Just pull it over to the side. Keep stirring. Let the bubbles subside. Keep a stirring. We want to just let all the bubbles dissipate so we can actually see our liquid. Now, see, we can move these bubbles, this foam, kind of move it out of the way a little bit and look down in there, and still it's a little cloudy. There's still some sugar crystals that haven't dissolved yet. It's not just totally transparent.
there are still some sugar crystals that hadn't dissolved yet. So we're going to add, and I can't do this, we're going to add a tablespoon of water to it, and I got to set the phone down. Okay, we added a tablespoon of water. Got to be careful, you don't want any of this to splash on you. Okay, now we're going to slide it back over on the heat, and it instantly, almost instantly jumps up to a boil again. That's why you got to be so careful with this stuff. It holds the heat, because it instantly jumped up to a boil. That's how much heat it still had in it. I'm going to bring it up to a good boil, and we're going to pull it back off the heat. Let the bubbles die down. And we're real close. I can see the bottom of the pan, but it's still a little cloudy. So we're going to go one more tablespoon. Slide it back over onto the heat. Let me get my finger out of the way. One more tablespoon. Bring her back up to a boil. Slide her back off. And I'm fairly confident this is going to be enough. Now, I can already see it. Can you see the silver, the bottom of the pan? See the machining and all on it? This is what you're looking for. And you see that 1 tablespoon was enough to go from cloudy to clear. That's what you're looking for. You can see straight down to the bottom of the pan. You can see the machining on the pan. It's just transparent. It's not, it really ain't clear because it's got a tint to it, but it's completely transparent. So we're good to go. I'm going to switch the camera around, and we'll only let this cool just a little bit, not much, because it has like a working temperature. And I'm going to switch the camera around. We'll start glazing some of them. Okay, we're going to put our glaze here on our towel because it just makes it a little bit easier. Don't have to worry about burning my wax paper or anything. Now let's see if we can see this. Yep. Okay. So here is a pan of our cinnamon rolls. Let me get a brush. Alrighty. Now, like I say, if you're still a little antsy about burning yourself, just spread these out, take your brush, and paint. You'll have a smaller saucepan. You'll have a saucepan with a handle on it. And then just take and just paint the outside, the top, and the tops of your cinnamon rolls, and you're good to go. So we're going to gently, if I can do this on camera, everything's harder to do on camera, I'll tell you. We're going to gently pull these apart. Try to get them at the seams. Just like that. Okay. Now, this is the dangerous part. Okay. Danger, Will Robinson. Danger. The old people out there know what I'm talking about. Now, what I do, this is the part I was telling you about that'll go stale if you pull them apart too quick. So what I do, because I've done this hundreds of times now. So I kind of know how to hold the roll. So what I'm going to do, I do the sides first, and the two that are open, I basically just dunk them in a little bit, not much, just a little bit, just enough to submerge the edge, and then give it a little quick wipe off the excess, let what you're not using just drip back down into your pan. Then the two sides that have a crust on them, I'll just paint those, because it keeps my fingers from getting burnt. Okay, now I've got all four sides glazed, and I will come back, once I get all those done, I'll come back and just brush over the top. Be real careful here where you're grabbing the roll, the cinnamon roll, because you don't want to grab onto that hot glaze. But if you watch what you're doing, you can hold it in the middle here on both sides and not really ever get the glaze directly on your hand, especially if you'll just take and wipe the excess off right quick. Let it run off, then paint the sides that have the crust. I know I make this look easy, it's because I've done hundreds of them. And we're going to lay that there. And think of it like you're doing a bad paint job. You don't care about runs. You just want a thick coating of paint on what you're dealing with. Okay? Now I'm going to go wash my hands right quick. Just rinse them off. Now here's where the saucepan would come in handy, because it has a handle on it. This has a kind of handle. So I'm just going to pick it up and get it over here close to it, because this does make a mess. And just paint the tops. Be gentle. Don't be stingy. If they've got cracks where the layers have separated, let some run down in there. Shoot, don't be stingy. Okay, just give her a good heavy painting. Just like that. Now, once you let these cool a little bit, they'll get to where you can handle them. It won't mess with them too bad. But the glaze will solidify and then be just like a regular glazed donut. So you can, if you're gentle with them, you won't even break the glaze. It'll stay on them, and you can move them off your drip rack over onto your wax paper and let them completely cool before you package them, or put them in the icebox, whatever you're going to do with them. You can eat them right now. This was it gets no better than this right here. Okay. That's about it. So like I say, if you were going to do a cream cheese, you're good to go. Flip them over, put your cream cheese on the top. Don't pull them apart till you get ready to serve them. If you're doing the cold glaze, we'll call it, with the powdered sugar, do it the same way. You apply it the same way I did the hot. Now, if you're doing the hot, keep an eye on it. It's one of those deals, once you start, kind of hard to stop, because at a certain temperature, the sugar will start to recrystallize
in your liquid. When that happens, you just put it back on the stove, bring it back to a boil. You may have to add a hair more water, okay? Get the crystals dissolved again, and then continue on, depending on how many you got to glaze. Normally, if you just do one batch, usually you won't even have to heat it up. You might have to, but once you see the crystals start forming again in the glaze, heat it up. You can go on and put them on, but it won't be the same. It'll be gritty. It just won't. It'll be sweet and good and whatnot, but it just won't be as good as it can be, as if you put it on when they're totally dissolved. Okay. Now, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments. Like I say, I'm not a cook reviewer or food reviewer or video YouTube food guy. I do vape stuff. Normally, I just had this recipe. I wanted to put it out there just for information and a little different way of doing cinnamon rolls. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you make them, I hope you enjoy them. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.